We creationists look to the family level as a kind.
And that's the shot that blew your own foot off. This alone proves everything I've told you. Do you realize that Hominidae is a taxonomic family? Meaning by your own words, apes and humans are the same biblical kind? Also important is that means that all fly species in Drosophila and Drosophilidae we have been discussing are related. They're all in the same genus too, which is even more specific, so you literally didn't take 2 seconds to Google the family of the species we're talking about. This is why people say creationists cannot do research. So today we're going to be embarrassing the cowardly clown known as BadFaith-Dishonest&False, a person so vitriolic, so cowardly, so laughably arrogant, he might actually be dumber and more dishonest than Nephilim Free himself. He is Captain Dunning-Kruger, so overconfident that he gives us endless self-defeating comedy gold. He is basically writing a book on me and promised to write hundreds of pages. It's 44 pages long so far. His form of argumentation consists solely of ad hominem and strawman, and when called out, he runs away at full sprint. He has no interest in good faith conversations, no interest in debating, just in demonizing people who destroy his bad arguments. He claims that I am a reporting dog, whatever that means, which I tried to clarify, but he didn't seem to get the message. Apparently, I suppose it means he thinks I falsely report comments on YouTube. I have never reported a single thing on YouTube, ever, for any reason. I'm a free speech absolutist. I want him to be able to expose how big of a lying bitch he is. Why would I want this evidence to disappear? It's hilarious. It is in fact one or more of his friends who are censoring me. For example, all my live chat comments were removed, either by silencing me in whole or they were individually screened on SFT's channel. I think the Bad Faith, Dishonest and False has moderator powers on SFT's channel, so it might be him censoring me while crying about me censoring others, which I would never do. I wouldn't even censor slurs or so-called hate speech. Nothing is more childish than censorship. In fact, it appears as if someone is deleting my comments on SFT's channel. As far as I can reckon, that can only be one person, unless Bad Faith reported my comments he is responding to and then claiming are lies. So let's go through his sheer genius then. His dossiers on me are full of quote mines and strawman because, as the tippy top of Mount Dunning-Kruger, he thinks he knows what he's talking about when he has absolutely no idea. Like this one, for example. Although random mutations influenced the course of evolution, their influence was mainly by loss, alteration, and refinement. Never, however, did that one mutation make a wing, a fruit, a woody stem, or a claw appear. Mutations, in summary, tend to induce sickness, death, or deficiencies. No evidence in the vast literature of hereditary changes shows unambiguous evidence that random mutation itself, even with geographical isolation of populations, leads to speciation. Since he's the textbook example of Dunning-Kruger, he doesn't understand what this even means. Yes, mutations alone tend to be deleterious. That's why no one says mutation alone leads to speciation. That's why this quote is a quote mine and it's not actually refuting any scientific consensus. This is a straw man, decades old. Bad Faith clearly is incapable of gaining new information. But that doesn't mean that life isn't. Mutation plus selection are the mechanisms of evolution. Mutation plus selection. Get it through your head. He conveniently quote mines things around this fact so he can omit the truth. Also, yes, it is true that no single mutation can make a wing, fruit, stem, or claw, or etc. It would be hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of mutations repurposing existing information, existing appendages and cell clusters for new functions, slowly over time. This just shows how uneducated he is and how much of a straw man lover he is, that he thinks science claims one mutation can do any of this, all on its own. He doesn't even know how evolution works, but presumes to lecture me about it. He can't even handle it when I attempt to agree with him that mutations only ever occur in existing DNA. This is because he has to lie and say that scientists claim that genes pop out of nowhere. No scientist will ever claim this. This is a blatant lie which he refuses to back up when actually held to account, which is why he will not debate me and has stopped responding to me because I'm holding him account on this definition of what a de novo gene is. He is a coward who wants to hide behind rhetoric alone and not back up any of his straw men. More on that later. Another picture from his document in an attempt to claim that all these things are pre-created by God. He tries to cite things that are necessary in fetal development, which science classifies as mutations. Yet while organisms can become dependent upon new functions rather quickly, necessity isn't a hallmark of design. However, unnecessary design structures are a hallmark of evolution. Like with penguin wings, it is unnecessary that they have the same bones as flying birds in their wings. If penguins were designed, they should just have a common design for fins, but they don't. They have a wing design for their fins. That's exclusively concordant with inheritance. Amoebas alone destroy his entire ideology. First of all, amoebas have evolved dependencies on endosymbionts that infected them as bacteria, thus confirming mitochondrial theory. Hilariously, he claims I will never find anything like this. He claims there is not now, nor will there ever be, a citation that claims to solve mitochondrial endosymbiosis. Again, he demonstrates that creationists are utterly incapable of doing 2 seconds of research, since this has actually assumed the status of a theory, the highest level in science. Here's your citation that you said you know does not and never will exist. Secondly, in the case of amoebas, they have the largest genome of any organism, meaning either A, that they expanded and added information to their genome via evolution and the mechanisms studied by science, or it was created by God and God somehow needed more information to create an amoeba than he needed to create a human being. Which is it? Amoebas destroy your entire ideology all on their own, and then you do the rest of the work by yourself. Let's review a bit of our conversation so we can hold him a little bit more to account. Now, on the subject of genetic entropy, they're obsessed with nearly neutral mutations because they are almost invisible to natural selection, and there are several processes which make them more visible to natural selection, so they have to deny these processes as a matter of course, because science is always secondary to their fairy tale. One of these is synergistic epistasis, which has been shown to make nearly neutrals more visible to natural selection. The mere fact that you admit that it actually speeds up degeneration is an admission that it makes it visible to selection, because if it's speeding up the deleterious effects, the more deleterious, the more likely it is to be killed off or not able to breed, and that's how selection works. Duh! If it's so bad that it's causing degeneration, then those individuals who have those mutations are now visible to selection. Not only are there multiple forms of epistasis, which is just the way that mutations interact with each other, scientific models have extensively shown that it does indeed solve the problem of genetic entropy, real name genomic meltdown, or Muller's ratchet. So of course they had to publish their own stuff refuting that. Cue John Sanford. Now, Sanford's paper is not accepted by the genetics community for a huge number of reasons. First of all, his program, Mendel's Accountant, is not a serious model. It has multiple flaws and is designed to get the results he wants. He's updated it a few times to make it better, but it still suffers from flaws like locking the population to certain unrealistically small size ranges, due to it being optimized for computers with a very weak processing power. Another significant flaw, at least with past simulations, is that it doesn't allow new mutations to occur until the current one has gone to 99% fixation, which is not how mutation works at all. And in this iteration, it doesn't account for beneficial mutations at all. None. Zero. He literally has to ignore beneficial mutations because he knows including beneficial mutations in the model corrects for genomic decay so rapidly that he has to lie by omission. This deliberate omission throws off all the results, completely biasing the conclusions from the get-go. So this paper is absolute trash in its inception. It is not a realistic model whatsoever. Yes, the calculations are valid within its narrow parameters, but they are not sound, as it isn't a realistic model. It's a fantasy model that doesn't represent anything in reality. This paper wasn't even reviewed or published by geneticists, but earth and environmental science. And looking at epistasis alone ignores all the other selection methods and completely ignores beneficial mutations. No one is saying that synergistic epistasis alone can halt genomic meltdown. You need beneficial mutations and several forms of selection acting in tandem. Beneficial mutations don't even have to occur at a high rate for it to work. In fact, they occur in humans at a rate of about 3 deleterious to 1 beneficial. This makes sense because when we model beneficial mutations as occurring at the same rate as deleterious, evolutionary fitness increases occur way too fast to be realistic. Just a small amount of beneficial mutations, even one every couple hundred generations, can completely eliminate any concerns of genomic decay. Kimura shows that selection alone can eliminate deleterious mutations without beneficial ones. Kimura is Sanford's source for saying adding beneficial mutations have unrealistic results. However, it's only unrealistic in the positive direction because it makes evolution go super fast if beneficials are occurring at the same rate as deleterious, which we know is not true. They occur at a rate of 3 to 1. Kondrashov shows that this can be resolved as long as mutations aren't individually selectable, which in reality they are not. They are linked and interact with each other. The entire genome is selected for, not individual mutations, which have different effects depending on the rest of the genome. So that's the entirety of their proof of genetic entropy. Just a bunch of straw men. Sanford himself admits that experimental data do not support his model. Sanford does mention how viruses can go extinct due to mutations, but we are currently living in a time dominated by the Kung flu, whose mutations made it better at spreading than the non-Lomain strains, so it's just not an argument. Yes, some strains will mutate themselves to extinction, others will mutate and become more fit. That's how evolution works. This isn't a case of a preserved and resurrected strain. All epistasis does is makes nearly neutral mutations visible to selection, and you admit this by saying it makes things worse and kills off individuals with this level of mutational load. If it's killing individuals with these mutations due to the mutations interacting and making each other's effects worse, that's a very strong selection. Death, deformation, infertility, and low fitness of any kind are highly visible to selection, so neither you nor your illustrious idiot John Sanford understand this subject at all, or rather you deliberately dumb yourselves down and strawman it because it doesn't fit into your fairy tale SpongeBob imagination land. You say it doesn't affect selection at all out of one side of your mouth while saying it impacts fitness out of the other side. So which is it? It cannot be both. If it impacts fitness, it will be visible to selection. Period. That's how it works. And epistasis is different for each individual. Most mutations will never go to fixation in the whole population. Individuals with bad combinations will be weeded out. Not all mutations go to fixation. That's one of the main problems with Mendel's accountant, Sanford's epically stupid program. And combined with the fact of beneficial mutations and things like Lenski's experiments showing fitness increases in all populations, makes this idea absolutely absurd and laughable to those who put scientific facts first and foremost. Whenever you say science is secondary to your religious beliefs, you have given up all claims to objectivity. We have examples of this occurring within specific species like asexual species who should see higher risk to mutational meltdown. And even in fruit flies, epistasis can cause sterility, meaning they are highly visible to selection. Rage all you want, your rhetoric doesn't stand up to observation. Epistasis is observed over and over and over again to be able to increase the visibility of individual mutations by linking them to other mutations that cause loss of function. Loss of function is extremely visible to selection. This has to do with the combinations of mutations which individually are harmless, but together become visible. So the whole genome of anything that has these epistatically interacting mutations becomes visible. P.S. Your created kinds would already be dead under your model. They go through the most extreme bottlenecks possible off the arc, and in that dangerous range, not even beneficial mutations can save them. They'd be dead in less than 100 generations, and yet we observe organisms surviving way past 100 generations with no degeneration, and in fact expanding their genomes and gaining novel genes. This leads us to the Drosophila orphan genes paper that was the inception of all this arguing. So in response to these facts, BadFaith-Dishonest&False responds with insulting my parents, getting my name wrong, claiming I'm not educated, asking if I'm gay, and asking if I have eaten estrogen-rich foods. He goes on and on and on about, and he has all of these articles and sources about being gay, which just makes me think he thinks a lot about being gay. Homosexuality is on this guy's mind a lot. It seems like he has to do a lot of work to convince himself not to be gay. Actual straight men don't have to go through this effort. They just know they like women. Actual straight people just like women. They don't have to avoid certain foods to trick themselves into being heterosexuals. And he accuses me of not liking the Bible because I'm gay, which I'm not. I don't like the Bible because it's stupid and makes no sense. Has nothing to do with what I want to stick my dick into. And most, if not all, the gays that I know are actually Christians, so this is just hilarious. He keeps linking this document over and over again, even though I've already told him that I've written my response to it. And I just want to know whether he thinks the Drosophila species are the same kind or not. His response, "Oh, I must be gay then."
Wow.
So he must be really scared of this question. Then admits he doesn't understand any of the technical jargon, even though I'm really not using any of the technical jargon because I'm speaking down to his child level of understanding. And he still won't answer. And we go back and forth, and finally, he shoots himself in the foot beautifully. He says, "Do you think standing for truth is so stupid as to not have considered this orphan gene thing?" Yes, you've accused me of being that stupid. Well, I don't think he's that stupid. I think he's that dishonest with himself. So Bad Faith tries to get around this and says God could have easily made two kinds of flies. He spells flies wrong. He doesn't even know how to spell the word flies. These very basic things that you'd expect of adults, he isn't capable of. Like God made different kinds of birds. Okay, yes, and you call them all birds? Just like humans are apes, even if we aren't related. But watch this, you prove in a couple of sentences that humans are apes by your standards. So, God obviously didn't create a single bird to speciate into all birds on Earth or one bacteria. So for 120,000 species of flies, I have to look and see how many families of flies there are, because that is what matters. Looks to be 188 families, so no. We creationists look to the family level as a kind. So there are many fly kinds. But you didn't even bother to look at what family the fly species we're talking about were in. You couldn't take 2 seconds to do it. Each species we're talking about is in the Drosophila genus. And if you want to go to the family level, Drosophilidae, well then, you're saying that every single one of these species is evolved from the same biblical kind. This is all on the family level, which you said is how you define a kind. By the way, Hominidae is a family that consists of humans, chimps, gorillas, orangutans. Now I can stop there, but here's why this is important. In this study, we're talking about 6 species of Drosophila, which are all in the same family and all in the same genus. Meaning, by your definition, they are related. And you know what's more? In this study, it is observed that Drosophila persimilis and Drosophila pseudoobscura are able to make viable fertile hybrids, meaning they can bring forth. Meaning they are related, so you can't get out of this. There were 228 orphan gene gains between these two species, which are able to bring forth with each other, and which are in the same family and the same genus. So by 2 or 3 creationist standards, they are the same biblical kind. And there are orphan gene gains within their kind. All of these are in the same genus, and a genus is the only level less specific than species. So you didn't just shoot yourself in the foot, you took several Abrams tanks, aimed them deliberately at your foot, and blew yourself and your ideology to smithereens. You claim that loss of orphan genes is the key point of this study, which it's not. The losses were measured by the same method as the gains were measured, because we know they're related. And so if you're going to claim that any of these genes were lost by this process, you have to accept the gains as well, because the only way we know they were lost is by knowing that they were related, and we're measuring the difference between their genomes. There are orphan genes that were not present in previous lineages, and there are orphan genes that were present in previous lineages that are not in the genome anymore in some of these species. So they are measured by the same method, and you have to assume that they were all related if you're going to accept any of the losses. And if you accept any of the losses, you have to accept all of the gains as well. So when you and Standing for Truth lie and say that there were only losses recorded in this study, you are deliberately lying, or you're admitting that you have no idea what the methodology of this paper was at all, because gains were recorded by the same method. Now you claim that evolutionists don't think that orphan genes are important because they arise spontaneously out of nowhere. I don't even know where to begin with this drivel. Orphan genes are very important. That's why we study them. That's why there was a whole study done on that. And they do not arise out of nowhere and nothing. All genes arise from some other gene, from a mutation in a pre-existing gene. Stop lying. This is not how we use the term de novo, period. You even try to quote mine spontaneously out of nowhere, but in the very next sentence it says that what it means is it takes existing material and mutates it. So you're just lying. Again, I'm not preaching, and my name is not Tyler. I'm just correcting your lies. And no, evolution is not a satanic message. Evolution has nothing to do with denying the Bible. The Bible is stupid all on its own. I've never and never will use evolution to deny the Bible. I will use it to deny certain literal interpretations of some myths in the Bible, but I will never use it to deny that God sent his son in the person of Jesus Christ. No, that story is stupid all on its own and has nothing to do with evolution. He thinks he's caught me somehow because the title of this paper is Genes from Scratch: The Evolutionary Fate of De Novo Genes. But this again just shows that this guy cannot read past the title of any of these research papers. Because right down here, it says processes like exaptation of transposable elements, gene duplication, and horizontal gene transfer emerge as potential forces underlying the generation of orphan genes. So you may not like the word choice from scratch, and I don't either. If you actually look at the usage and the context of the word, it is not what you're saying science is saying it is. Which is why I asked you for a dictionary definition and not some cherry-picked quote-mined bullshit that's out of context. And I also pointed out that Alan Fiducia doesn't think that birds are dinosaurs, yet he wrote a paper called Birds Are Dinosaurs. Titles can be misleading, so you actually have to read the paper that you're citing. You can't just cite the title of it. He quotes a study trying to have a usage of de novo, but again shoots himself in the foot because it says it originates de novo from non-genic DNA. Then he says they originated from existing DNA, not out of nowhere. Liar. So you just cited an example of the usage of de novo coming from pre-existing DNA, and I'm agreeing with that, and you can't handle that. Genes never come out of nowhere. I gave you a dictionary definition. De novo mutation, a genetic alteration that is present for the first time in one family member as a result of a variant, or mutation in a germ cell, egg or sperm, of one of the parents, or a variant that arises in the fertilized egg itself during early embryogenesis, also called de novo variant, new mutation and new variant. You can't get a variant out of nowhere. A variant is a change in something that exists already. Please tell me how you can get an alteration or a variant of nothing from nowhere. No, you can only get an alteration or a variant of something that already exists, dumbass. He promised me to give me proper definitions later, and I'm still waiting. I gave him the definition, and what does he say in response? Oh, look, the definition matters little. Stop wasting time on idiotic definitions. Are you that desperate? Are you that desperate that you promised me a definition, you punked out, and then I gave you the proper definition and it proves you absolutely and categorically wrong, that now you're saying that definitions don't matter? You know, then he starts threatening me with hell, and then I go, that's evil of a God to do it. And he asks, does it hurt when you find out someone you love, cares about you deeply, doesn't believe in you? And I say something along the lines of, sure, that would hurt, except I wouldn't throw them in a burning lake of fire as punishment like your evil God does. So he asked me if I have an underlying mental condition we don't know about. No, but your God certainly does, if he's willing to throw people in a fire because he hides from them.
The greatest bullshit story ever told. Think about it. Religion has actually convinced people that there's an invisible man living in the sky who watches everything you do every minute of every day. And the invisible man has a special list of 10 things he does not want you to do. And if you do any of these 10 things, he has a special place full of fire and smoke and burning and torture and anguish, where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time. But he loves you.
He's trapped at this point, so he's lashing out. He has no argument anymore, so he's just saying, you're a worthless piece of trash. It wouldn't matter if you had trillions of dollars. You would still be worthless. That's his response. Now that he's absolutely backed into a corner, he's been beaten, and he stops responding at that point. You say this paper assumes they rose from non-coding DNA/junk DNA. Yes, they think a lot of genes came from non-coding DNA because they have high sequence similarity with some non-coding DNA, meaning insertions, deletions, and duplications totally explain how this happens. By the way, how come you've been writing books about genetics, but you can't even spell genes? And the mere fact that you state here that junk DNA cannot make genes displays that you literally don't understand Genetics 101, literally. Apparently you don't know what a start and stop codon are. If these sequences occur in non-coding DNA, they become coding DNA.
These scientists admit they have no idea how these genes arise, but Snake implies that they understand the mechanisms they don't.
No, they admit they have a very good idea how these genes arrive because there are very well understood mechanisms that are likely to be at play here, like duplications and transposable elements that can cause new genes to arise. Since we can't just stick a camera into a chromosome and follow every single nucleotide, we can only compare sequences, and if they're different. And if the organisms are related, a mutation occurred. And we know these kinds of mutations occur. It's about as simple as 2 + 2. But for a creationist, it's beyond comprehension. They do say that things were poorly understood until they actually studied it, and now we understand it better. They preface the study with what was poorly understood. Do you understand why studies and experiments are performed? To learn more about a subject, to answer a question. After studying the problem, we know more. In this case, we know why the gene number has remained fairly constant, because the rate of gene gain is roughly the same as the rate of gene loss. It expands and contracts. As far as how orphan genes are born, they discuss multiple ways in which it is likely, since these mechanisms are known to occur, and they're known to cause differences in sequences, similar to those seen in orphan genes. Can you read? You certainly can't spell very well. And so you want to know how new genes emerging proves evolution. That's pretty simple. Every difference in every sequence can be accounted for by known processes. It is unfathomable how little you understand about genetics. You've proven over and over again you don't care how the terms are actually used. You say definitions of words don't matter. You can't even spell them, and the words you misspell aren't even complex jargon, just simple words like genes or flies, and yet you think you're qualified to write books on the subjects. You won't even read the context of the papers you cite for how the term is used, so everything you've done here is just a massive string of straw men. I'm sure you won't even watch this video past about 30 seconds, if you do at all, since you don't read the comments even, and you've admitted you won't even watch short videos responding directly to you and your friends. You avoid proof of evolution that, for example, Raw Matt asked for and I directly gave. You were so scared of that, you quit watching before I even got to the point. When I finally shoved your face in it, you acted like it was nothing, even though you had nothing to say and nothing to correct Raw Matt on. You are the textbook example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. I have not seen a better example of someone so arrogant and overconfident who was more incompetent than you are, and yet your creationist friends seem to sign off on all of your drivel, so this isn't really a case of cherry-picking the most insane among you. These blatant misunderstandings are endemic to seemingly all creationists, all the way from the least educated, you, to the most, John Sanford. None of you can actually pay attention to Genetics 101. This is what happens when science is secondary to your fairy tale. You have to ignore and cherry pick and beat around the bush. You cannot win this battle. You'd have much better luck with abiogenesis. Evolution denial is the lowest hanging fruit possible, but important to combat. Give it up. Evolution doesn't prove your God wrong, just shows the flood to be a metaphor. But you guys already admit a ton of the Bible is metaphorical, so this science should not be a problem for you to work into your overall fairy tale. Again, you have given up all claims of objectivity when science is secondary.
Yeah, well,
Creationists
lie. All the time.
You believe proving evolution will disprove God. That is extremely weak faith. So no, you are not faithful at all, and you come into these conversations with bad faith. You smear anyone trying to help you by correcting your misconceptions. Instead of engaging with the argument on the level of scientific mechanisms, you just accuse people of being homos and thus trying to avoid responsibility to a God they don't even believe in. You dishonestly claim that which is evidently not true, and claim the truth doesn't even matter when backed into a corner. And your false accusations and assertions of falsehoods just reveal that all your accusations, like being gay and trying to avoid the truth, are pure projections of your own temptations, habits, and biases.